Grazie a tutti voi per essere qui. Permettetemi di iniziare dicendo che per me è un grande piacere, ma anche un grande onore essere con Antonio Damasio, che ho sempre considerato, da anni considero uno degli intellettuali più brillanti e più affascinanti del panorama mondiale. Per me, direi, da molti anni era un sogno la possibilità di poter avere un dialogo con lui, e questa è un'occasione straordinaria per poterlo avere. Fatemi partire da questo. Il mondo, sappiamo un sacco di cose sul mondo, tantissime, ma il mondo è ancora pieno di misteri, e le cose che non sappiamo sono probabilmente molte di più di quelle che sappiamo. Fra i misteri che ci toccano di più c'è il mistero di noi stessi, la strana cosa che è la nostra mente, la nostra percezione, la nostra soggettività, sulla quale stiamo imparando moltissimo, ma sulla quale continuiamo a interrogarci, e ci sembra di avere moltissime domande ancora aperte. Quante domande ancora aperte? Forse anche questa è una domanda aperta. Io ho trovato nei libri di Antonio Damasio una apertura rispetto a questo problema che mi stupì moltissimo e che non c'era in tutto il resto di quello che leggevo su questo problema. Ed è ovviamente l'attenzione alle emozioni, al sentire, al sentimento, a tutto quello che non è direttamente il mondo razionale, la razionalità sulla quale tanta altro del tentativo di capire cosa noi siamo si era concentrato. Allora io vorrei iniziare questa serata leggendovi un breve passo del mio ultimo libro, le pagine finali, le 2 pagine finali del mio libro, perché credo che siano un omaggio ad Antonio Damasio in grande parte, e tutti quelli di voi che conoscono le sue idee sentiranno tanto in queste righe finali del mio libro c'è di Antonio Damasio. Il libro si chiude, parlo della ragione, dico quanto la ragione sia importante per noi, e credo in questi tormentati momenti politici lo è particolarmente. Chiudo con un ma, e il ma è questo: ma quello che ci motiva nella vita non sono argomenti razionali. La ragione ci serve per chiarirci le idee, per scovare gli errori, ma la ragione stessa ci mostra che i motivi per i quali agiamo sono iscritti nella nostra struttura intima di mammiferi, di cacciatori, di esseri sociali. La ragione illumina queste connessioni, non le genera. Noi non siamo in primo luogo esseri ragionevoli, lo possiamo forse diventare più o meno in seconda istanza. In prima istanza siamo portati dalla sete di vivere, dalla fame, dal bisogno di amare, dall'istinto di trovare il nostro posto in una società umana. La seconda istanza, la ragione, non esiste neppure senza la prima. La ragione arbitra fra gli istinti, ma usando gli istinti stessi come criteri primi di arbitraggio. Dà nome alle cose e alla sete, ci permette di aggirare ostacoli, di vedere come cose nascoste, ci permette di riconoscere strategie inefficaci, credenze errate, pregiudizi, e ne abbiamo innumerevoli di pregiudizi. La ragione si è sviluppata per aiutarci a capire quando le tracce che seguiamo pensando che ci conducono alle antilopi da cacciare sono tracce sbagliate. Ma quello che ci porta non è la riflessione sulla vita, è la vita. Che cos'è allora che ci porta veramente? È difficile dirlo. Forse del tutto non lo sappiamo. Riconosciamo in noi delle motivazioni, diamo nomi a queste motivazioni, ne abbiamo tante. Alcune pensiamo di condividerle con molti animali, altre solo con gli esseri umani, altre ancora con gruppetti più piccoli a cui percepiamo di appartenere. Fame e sete, curiosità, bisogno di compagnia, voglia di amare, innamoramento, ricerca della felicità, bisogno di conquistarci una posizione nel mondo, di essere apprezzati, riconosciuti, amati, fedeltà, onore, amore di Dio, sete di giustizia, libertà, desiderio di conoscenza. Da dove viene tutto ciò? Da come siamo fatti, da quello che siamo, prodotti di una lunga selezione di strutture chimiche, biologiche, sociali, culturali, che su piani diversi hanno a lungo interagito dando origine a questo buffo processo che siamo noi, del quale nel nostro riflettere su noi stessi, nel nostro guardarci allo specchio, capiamo solo qualcosa. Siamo più complessi di quanto le nostre facoltà mentali siano in grado di afferrare. L'ipertrofia dei lobi frontali è grande, ci ha permesso di arrivare sulla Luna, di scoprire i buchi neri, riconoscerci cugini delle coccinelli, ma è ancora insufficiente a chiarire noi a noi stessi. Poco sappiamo della relazione completa fra quello che vediamo del mondo e il mondo. Sappiamo che il nostro sguardo è miope. Del vasto spettro elettromagnetico non vediamo che una finestrella, non vediamo la struttura atomica della materia, né l'incurvarsi dello spazio. Vediamo un mondo coerente che estraiamo dalla nostra interazione con l'universo, organizzato nei termini che il nostro desolatamente stupido cervello è in grado di manipolare. Pensiamo il mondo in termini di sassi, montagne, nuvole, persone, e questo è il mondo per noi. Sul mondo indipendentemente da noi sappiamo molto senza sapere quanto sia questo molto. Ma il nostro pensiero non è solo preda della sua debolezza, lo è ancora più della sua stessa grammatica. Basta qualche secolo perché il mondo cambi. Da diavolacci, angeli e streghe si ripopoli di atomi e onde elettromagnetiche. Basta qualche grammo di funghi perché l'intera realtà si sciolga davanti ai nostri occhi e si riorganizzi in una forma sorprendentemente diversa. Basta avere un'amica che abbia avuto un episodio schizoide, serio, e avere passato con lei qualche settimana cercando fatica di comunicare, per rendersi conto che il delirio è una vasta attrezzatura di teatro, capace di organizzare il mondo, e che è difficile trovare argomenti per distinguerlo dai grandi deliri collettivi che sono il fondamento della nostra vita sociale e spirituale e della nostra comprensione del mondo, a parte forse la solitudine e la fragilità di chi si allontana dall'ordine comune. La visione della realtà è il delirio collettivo che abbiamo organizzato, si è evoluto ed è risultato abbastanza efficace per portarci almeno fino a qui. Gli strumenti che abbiamo trovato per gestirlo e accudirlo sono stati molti e la ragione si è rivelata tra i migliori. È preziosa, ma è uno strumento, una pinza, che usiamo per mettere le mani su una materia che è fatta di fuoco e di ghiaccio. Qualcosa che percepiamo come emozioni vive, brucianti. Queste sono la sostanza di noi stessi. Ci portano, ci trascinano, le ammantiamo di belle parole, ci fanno agire. E qualcosa di questo sfugge sempre all'ordine nei nostri discorsi, perché sappiamo che in fondo ogni tentativo di mettere in ordine lascia sempre qualcosa fuori. E a me sembra che la vita, questa breve vita, non sia che questo. Il grido continuo di queste emozioni che ci trascina, ci portiamo talvolta, che proviamo talvolta a chiudere in un nome di Dio, in una fede politica, in un rito che ci rassicuri che tutto alla fine è in ordine, in un grande, grandissimo amore. E il grido è bello, è splendente, talvolta è un dolore, talvolta è un canto. Il canto, come aveva osservato Agostino, è la consapevolezza del tempo. È il tempo, è l'inno dei Veda che è esso stesso lo sbocciare del tempo. Nel Benedictus della Missa Solennis di Beethoven, il canto del violino è pura bellezza, pura disperazione, pura felicità. Vi restiamo sospesi, trattenendo il fiato, sentendo misteriosamente che questa è la sorgente del senso. E questa è la sorgente del tempo. Poi il canto si attenua, si placa. Si rompe il cordone d'argento, la lucerna d'oro si infrange, si rompe l'anfora alla fonte, la carrucola cade nel pozzo, ritorna la polvere alla terra. E va bene così. Possiamo chiudere gli occhi, riposare. E tutto questo mi sembra dolce e bello. Questo è il tempo.
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. Great pleasure to be here with Carlo Rovelli, whom I very much admire, and a great pleasure to be here with many friends and some of you probably readers as well. So great pleasure in every respect. Like Carlo, I'm also going to read some notes that I prepared, and let me start by saying that at first glance, this meeting would seem a rather bizarre meeting. After all, Rovelli is an expert of the world of very small things, particles, for example, a world where structures and operations are invisible and behave in very unexpected ways. Now, I'm an expert of the world of minds, a world of feelings and thoughts and tangible creations and manipulations of objects. What could be more different? But then compatible things emerge. Rovelli has written a book called L'ordine del tempo. I did not know that he had written that book, and I had called mine at the same time, my new book, Lo strano, ordine, delle, cose. Both of us were concerned with order. It seems that we are both preoccupied with that notion, and we are also preoccupied with the notion of strangeness, things that are not quite what they seem to be and have some mystery behind them. As a physicist, Rovelli is preoccupied with strange structures and behaviors in a world where time, for example, does not exist in the way we conceive of it conventionally. And yet, as a human being, he is also interested in the world of behavior and mind, where conventional time does exist and is measured by clocks. So, in the world of behavior and mind, I'm interested in another kind of strangeness and in another order, and that explains my title. And the strange, unexpected order in which the components of conventional mind have emerged in evolution. Because there is a way in which we normally think of these things. We normally think that everything starts from very small and unminded and unable to run behavior autonomously, and then later on we come to have the minds that we have and that you obviously have, otherwise you would not be here. So the fact that small, single-celled creatures without nervous systems or even nuclei, and without minds obviously, behave intelligently and socially is something that interests me very much. And this intelligence is so great that, as I say in the new book, it is the kind of intelligence that allows them to have a social life in the sense that they can, for example, cooperate, or they can fight and have a conflict. They can construct things socially, or they can destroy things. All of this is happening in single-cell organisms that have existed for about 4 billion years and that do not even have a nuclei, let alone a nervous system or a mind. So cooperation, antagonism, and this ability to sense and to respond, which is very different from what we normally globally consider to perceive or to have a consciousness of a perception, these creatures do sense and they do respond. And the way in which they respond has something that we should characterize as motion. They act, and in some of them, once they are still single cells, but they have a nucleus and they're a bit more complex, no nervous system, they actually react in a way that is emotive. Emotive in the sense that the word tells you. It's about motere, it's about moving towards the outside. And, you know, an amoeba can do things that are extremely similar to what we do, such as being threatened and flinch and withdraw into oneself, or being in a delightful atmosphere where everything is conducive to our continuation and where we expand and relax. So this is, in fact, the core element of what later on we come to call emoting. But still, it only has to do with motion. It doesn't have to do with the mind. Now, something that is also very strange is that all of this has to do with the running of life operations. None of this would make sense without life. This is not the creatures that I'm talking about, small as they are not inert in the sense that this table is, or this piece of microphone. They have a life, and that life is run by a process that has, unfortunately, a name that is not, the set of processes that is not very attractive, in Italian homeostasis in English, and it really is a set of processes that does this spectacular thing, is run against the second law of thermodynamics, and instead of allowing any organism to decay and disappear with entropy and come to stillness, no motion, it does the opposite. It animates the organism so that organisms can become living and can pick up energies from energy sources, transform that energy in something that we better call metabolism, and that it's really Stoffwechsel, this exchange that the word metabolism doesn't capture so well, and it does other things such as not only transform the energy but have products that need to be excreted and need to be thrown away. And it does all this with a constant search for steady states. There's certain, it's not in a single way of behaving. It has varied ways, and some of them are very good in the sense that they operate very efficiently, and some of them are not so efficient, and in some of them there's hardly any energy to continue, and in some of them you actually save energy. You do what we do in economics, we save money and we put it in the bank. That's exactly how life has been from very early on. Banking is another story, of course, we're not going to go there. This process of countering disorder is a very important one. And what I would like, this is of course what homeostasis is all about, and what I would like to add is that in organisms that have nervous systems which appear very, very late in this whole story, because they appear about 500 million years ago. Just imagine, 4 billion for the beginning of life, 500 million only for the emergence of nervous systems, and they were not like our nervous systems, of course. They were very simple. They were actually controls of a digestive tract. So the point, and this is the very beautiful point, I think, in this story, is that mentally, once nervous systems could generate what we call a mind, could generate representations that had something that resembled an object, such as, for example, my having the possibility visually of creating a representation, a mapping of this rose that I have in front of me with certain characteristics that correspond to whatever the true physics of this rose is. I cannot say that I'm mapping you because you're completely in the dark. As far as I'm concerned, I can barely see Roberto and Fleur in the first row, and I cannot even see my wife. Anyway, so all of this power of regulation, this sort of up and down, this struggle, literally, for life, is mentally expressed by feelings. Mentally expressed by feelings. Just think of it. When we normally consider feeling well or feeling sick or feeling angry and so forth, we don't realize that feeling is actually a very early quote-unquote discovery of nature, in the sense that this mechanism is so powerful that it was found and it was selected, it worked, and it has kept on. And so feeling is actually a very early development, not so early as life itself, but something that has been accompanying creatures all the way into what we are today. And those feelings of good and bad direction are giving you something, some information that is extremely useful once we have a mind that is complex enough about how the life process is being run. It's literally information about how our life is going. And so when you are sick, sickness, malaise, pain, suffering, all of that is telling you very directly that your machine biologically is not going to last long if it continues that way, and something needs to be done about it. Of course, I want to go now into the last part of my point for today, the last part also of the point of the book, is that just think of malaise and sickness and think about something that we have culturally been doing for a good part of human existence on Earth since humans were smart enough and collected enough to analyze what was going on around them and to them. And that is what happens with medicine. So I'm a little bit biased because my first training was as a physician. I wanted to be a scientist at the same time, but that's another story. But really the heart of what being a physician is dealing with a complaint of pain or suffering or some other malaise and finding a way to correct that so that that state, that negative state can disappear. Now, just think about it. What do you do why do you go to a doctor? And what do you complain about? You complain about a feeling, in this particular case, a bad feeling, which can be some kind of pain or some kind of suffering, some kind of malaise. So it is a feeling that brings you to the doctor and is in fact doing something extremely valuable for you. And then, if the doctor does his job right and he treats you well, there's going to be a disappearing of the pain and the suffering and potentially even well-being, which would follow. And what is that? It's again a feeling. First, the change in the primary feeling of not so well, and then a feeling that gives way, which is the feeling of being well. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is first to focus on the fact that these things called feelings are not useless stuff. These things are the natural evolution of the process of sensing and responding with action, but now sensing and responding with an action that can be picked up in this very complex mind that can map things inside of our bodies and around our bodies. And then to make the ultimate point, which is in the subtitle of my book. By the way, Adelphi doesn't have subtitles on the cover of the books, which of course I don't like, but I will accept that because they're great publishers. But so you have to go inside the book to discover that the subtitle is La vita, I sentimenti, something like the making of cultures, la fabbrica delle culture. And this is to make the point that it is through feelings primarily and not through intellectual elaborations that we have come into this wonderful world that we enjoy and that a festival like this celebrates, which is the world of culture. So why is it that we ever invented and wanted to have the arts, wanted to have painting and music and sculpture? Why is it that we had governance? Why is it that we had economics or moral systems or systems of justice or science and technology? And of course, within the technology very early on, why is it that we had medicine, which was one of the first technologies that then became a technoscience as we have today? We had all that because once the feelings were present already and something changed in the composition of humans thanks to the complexity of our nervous systems that allowed us to literally make a diagnosis of the problem that we face. Cultures in general, cultural activities are responses to the defects, to the problems that we find. And as you know, sometimes they're very good and sometimes they're not so good. When you think about the world of our society today and of politics, it's clear that we're not doing so well, but that's another story. It's still the fact that feelings were the motives behind the cultures. And let me just tell you a story. For a while, some years ago, when I was thinking of writing this book, I asked a number of colleagues and friends, for a while, systematically, I said, what do you think brought us to the cultural world that we have today? Invariable response. Well, obviously, human intellect. We're very smart people. We have a lot of intelligence. We have accumulated knowledge. We can analyze the knowledge. We're very social. We have this hyper-sociability that is part of the primate world and is so great with us. Well, all of that is true. Who would deny that the way into which you have Beethoven composing the piece that Carlo referred to, or we have Picasso or David Hockney painting their paintings, or the spectacular developments of novels and art throughout the world. That could not have happened if people were not extremely bright, extremely attentive to the past, extremely attentive to their own experiences, and of course inserted in this world trying to do what? To do a response to the world they were living in. There's a responding, and that responding comes out of a diagnosis of something that is wrong, or something that at least can be made better. So I think that the notion of emotive and feeling, of affective motivation for cultures is an essential one, and I think it's one that people do not really pay attention to. One other point, long after I was very keen on this idea of feelings as a motive behind any cultural development that you can think of, I realized that along with the story that I just told you about the doctor that treats the patient, is that feelings are also monitors of the situation. So it's not just motivating the process, it's a process of motivating, but then monitoring the result and allowing us to decide, did it work or did it not work? We do this all the time when we criticize new music or new painting, or when we criticize the action of a political party, of a politician. We constantly are measuring results, and those results are in part measured through effects that are effective. Now, of course, we do want to, because we have such a complex and rich nervous system, we do want to go in the direction of reason, and reason that is based and articulates knowledge, and that's all well and good, but I submit that a world in which we would be purely concerned with knowledge and reasoning would actually give you a robotic world in which you would not be any happier than the world we are in today. It's better to live with the troubles that we do live with than not. I think I probably will stop right here, and let's have our conversation and maybe bring additional points. But just please keep this idea in mind, and that things did not just develop with the cerebral cortex. If there's something that I'm worried about, is the over-concern that biology in general, but modern neuroscience in particular, has had with the cerebral cortex. True enough, it is the most developed of the new parts of the nervous system, but the nervous system is huge, and it didn't start there. The cerebral cortex and the world, the world that comes out of the cerebral cortex is very late in the story. I used to have very agreeable and sometimes not so agreeable conversations with somebody that I admire tremendously, and that was Francis Crick. Because Francis Crick, after a series of spectacular developments in the direction of biology, simple things like DNA, Francis Crick turned to neuroscience, and in one of his adventures in neuroscience, he thought that, well, where are we going to find consciousness? We're going to find consciousness in the thing that is most developed in the nervous system, and in the thing that most characterizes the novelties of the human nervous system, and that's the cerebral cortex. Well, wrong. Consciousness is not going to start there. Consciousness needs to start way below, needs to start with life, needs to start with being, and then we can worry about knowing and about deciding, but there's that intermediate component that is feeling, and sure enough, the cerebral cortex is involved with certain parts of feeling, the feeling process, but not the beginning of it. The feeling process actually begins in our body, and begins in our body way before there's a nervous system, as it should, and it then is incorporated over many, many stages that go all the way up to the brain stem, where the goods really are. Thank you very much for your attention.
Devo parlare italiano, non inglese. Io comincerei questa chiacchierata con una domanda, o forse vorrei portare tutta la chiacchierata su una domanda sola a cui io non ho risposta e credo che non sia solo una domanda mia, e vorrei capire, Antonio Damasio, cosa lei pensa davvero rispetto a questa domanda. E la domanda riguarda un salto, a jump, che non so se sia un salto o no, forse non lo è, ma è quello che vorrei cercare di capire. Io trovo estremamente convincente, da ignorante di biologia e di neuroscienza, da curioso esterno, trovo estremamente convincente questo tentativo di comprendere cosa siamo, così ampio, che parte dall'intelligenza, dalla cooperazione, dall'abilità di sentire e di rispondere delle singole cellule, e cresce via via nei miliardi di anni dell'evoluzione, e ancora più trovo convincente la centralità di quella cosa che lei chiama feelings, in italiano sensazione o sentimento, se è stato tradotto in varie maniere, che ha definito adesso, ha descritto adesso come l'informazione che il sistema nervoso ha riguardo prima di tutto il corpo stesso, prima ancora che... C'è a questo punto sempre, in me come in tante persone, una sensazione di abbiamo capito questo passaggio o non lo abbiamo capito? E cerco di spiegarmi un po' meglio. Se io mi taglio con un coltello, provo una sensazione, un feeling molto forte che fa male, e la provo fortemente. Certamente succedono tantissime cose nel mio corpo. Succedono delle cose localmente, succedono delle cose nelle cellule attorno, nasce un'infiammazione, non lo so, i nervi portano dell'informazione, il mio cervello reagisce, io comincio a respirare forte, grido ai ai ai, e fa male, sento male. Questa sensazione soggettiva, a me sembra, se io potessi capire completamente che cos'è, cosa sta succedendo alla mia sensazione soggettiva, mi sembrerebbe di avvicinarmi a capire che cos'è la mia mente, cos'è la mia soggettività, cosa sono io. Mi sembra che il problema sia quello, cosa succede quando io sento male. Se io ho un'anestesia locale o globale, tantissime cose succedono lo stesso. L'infiammazione succede lo stesso, i nervi, se l'anestesia globale, portano lo stesso informazione, ma io non sento male. Sembra che ci sia un on-off, acceso-spento, rispetto a delle sensazioni. Quando dormo non ho sensazioni di quando sono sveglio, c'è un on-off, sembra, forse non c'è, ma sembra che ci sia un salto fra avere e non avere la sensazione, e cerco di spiegarmi meglio. Io posso immaginare una cosa molto simile a me, che si taglia, che ha un computerino che ha informazioni su come... Posso immaginare una macchina, un'automobile di quelle di Google che guidano da sole, che ha un sistema centralizzato che ha informazioni su come va la macchina, che quando vede che scalda troppo, che si raffredda troppo, fa un campanello d'allarme, che se si rompe una gomma si accende una lampadina rossa e squilla e frena perché c'è un problema, che cerca di mantenere una specie di versione semplificata di omeostasi, e in cui c'è un cervello centrale che ha informazioni sulla... E mi chiedo, quello che succede in questa automobile, che ha informazioni su una rottura di un equilibrio, informazioni allarmanti rispetto all'equilibrio, è semplicemente una forma primitiva, magari meno sviluppata, della mia sensazione di dolore o no? Questa è un po' la domanda, e aggiungo una versione di questa domanda, che è questa: perché la natura, che è così gentile e buona, non si è evoluta facendomi funzionare esattamente come funziono, prendere le decisioni come funziono, reagire al dolore di colpo, ma non facendomi sentire così male?
Very good questions. Okay, let me start by dealing with the first one. Is it really the same thing to have, for example, a car that is highly automated, full of devices that pick up on the operations of its different components, and having something like our bodies responding to the kind of function that is operating? And I would say that the difference is huge. And it is not just a small difference that pertains to the complexity of the technology. The difference is actually something very simple that, many years ago, Hannah and I were working on this. We're comparing the physiology of an airplane. I remember we were comparing the physiology of a Boeing 777, which is by now a very old-fashioned plane, and a human being. And what happens is that in machines, such as the car or the Boeing 777, you have these huge components of the body that are literally inert. They're made of steel or plastic or some other kind of metal or some kind of fabric. They do not have singular components that make up a tapestry of different living cells. With us, that's not the case. Everything that we have, including our bones are about the closest to dead that we can have in certain components, because there's an enormous deposit of calcium, and the cells have become rigid, which is important to give us stability in the body. But everything else that is happening in our skin, or in our brain, or in our intestine, or in our whatever organ you think of, is collections of cells that are organized sometimes in a community. For example, take the cells of the pancreas, or the cells of the liver, or the cells of in certain parts of the hypothalamus or the hypophysis. Those cells, each of them has exactly the same problem that you and I have, which is that we're mortal. We were born, we have a lifespan, and one day, once things start decaying in terms of the efficiency of metabolism, we're going to die. Those cells are going to die too. So it's a very different arrangement, and that's why the car is unlikely to ever come to the kind of complexity that we have in relation to the life process. Now, the car can absolutely overtake us precisely because it is not like us. So I can perfectly well imagine a device, and this already is happening in certain autopilot controls. It's probably the reason why we can have planes flying all over Europe and the United States without crashing into each other constantly, even with very small separations that are frightening to think of, is that you can make, from an engineering point of view, you can make the perfection of those instruments. With living creatures, like living cells, or even living tissues or organs, you cannot get to that point of perfection, beginning with our brain, but ending with our system. So I think my answer to you, Carlo, is that we're just very imperfect in the regulation, and the best of homeostasis that we can achieve is still a long, long way from creating perfection. But by the way, one very interesting aspect is that at the level of the cerebral cortex, there's probably more sharpness than there is in other parts of the brain that are more related, for example, to feelings. And part of it is an engineering problem too. A lot of the cells on which we depend for you to write your beautiful work in physics, you have axons of neurons that are myelinated and are insulated. Whereas most of the cells, most of the neurons on which our feelings depend are actually unmyelinated. So they are at the mercy of the environment. So the extracellular environment can have chemical molecules that directly influence them, which is one reason why people, this is my prediction, people are not going to create robots that resemble at all humans. They can be superhuman in intelligence, but they're going to be extremely stupid in relation to feelings and in relation to anything that resembles humanity. They're going to resemble what they will be, which is monsters, but not anything that looks like human beings. Sorry for the short one. By the way, I'm fascinated by the little book that he has there and the little writings. Fantastic. All of these complicated things out of a small piece of paper.
So, are you saying that the only way for reproducing the kind of feeling of pain when I'm cut is to have the full complexity of both the cellular structure and the mental structure, so.
That's a very good question.
You need all of that, and both of that. And are you saying that that's the first question? And the second question is that do you think you actually have a full understanding of the emergence of the subjective feeling of pain?
Okay, so let's answer the second one first. No, I don't have a full understanding of anything, but I think I have a better understanding than I had 5 years ago, and I think that we're inching towards a reasonably complex understanding of the feeling system. Now, again, your first question, I was so interested in the second.
The first question is whether you think to suppose I want to reproduce in the universe another something that can have pain. There's a very easy way to do that. Perfect. Go in a bed with a girl and do another one. Okay. But if I didn't want to go that way, what should I put inside? The full complexity of the biology plus.
Yeah, you don't need the full complexity. You can have a system. If you're designing a system that is going to operate efficiently to help with maintaining whatever organism you're designing, you do not need the full complexity that we have. Yeah, I think you can do it with less, because what you really need is alert systems in order to prevent the damage to the system. The problem is if you also want to have an experience.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, what do I need to create something that has experience? What is the ingredient for that?
Okay, so there I think you would have to have the possibility of mapping the disturbed process. It needs to be mapped, because otherwise what would you experience? You wouldn't know what to experience. And then you need to have an experiencer. You need to have the possibility of creating a perspective onto the thing that you're mapping. And this is the very tricky thing that is missing from the common attempts at describing, say, a neuroscience of consciousness. And I think that we humans in particular, but I think other creatures, get at that perspective by being able to map the sort of frame of our body and having a perspective that is the perspective of the organism. And it's quite interesting because, first of all, we have the perspective of the head, where by coincidence we have a lot of our sensory organs. So we have two eyes, we have ears, we have a sense of taste and smell all together. And then we have a lot of fine perception of touch, which is distributed in the skin, but it's largely vehicled by the hands. So you need to have both a perception, a mapping of the object of which you're conscious, but also of the way in which your whole organism is projecting itself onto that object. And that can only come from describing the frame of your body. It doesn't make any difference whether you're small or big, we do have a frame, and curiously, this is done by an entirely different part of the brain from the part of the brain that is doing, for example, the feeling or the touching. And we have ways of, in the brain of mapping the structure of the body. And then so the consciousness, I think, emerges, and that experience that we're talking about emerges from this combination of things. It's the process that gives you the fundamental elements of pain, for example. It's the process that gives you the frame of your organism. So now you are an experiencer. You have a perspective. The same way that the camera or the painter will have a perspective. And then you animate this with feeling, because you're going to give it a color that is the color of the moment, and it's going to be either good, or if you happen to be sick, not so good, or if you happen to be mad at something, it's going to be even worse. So you need, but it's not one thing only. The big problem with the notion of experience and consciousness and trying to map it is trying to reduce it to one element. This is it's going to be a hugely complicated engineering problem. And we need to have those components, and I'm sure I'm just touching on the fundamental elements, and I'm sure I'm missing some.
In the book that I wrote, I talk about time, and if there's one message in the book which I wrote, is that time seems to us a very clear thing, that we know what it is. And when we discover that in the fundamental equation of the world there's no time variable, we say where time comes in. And then we look for the source of time, the single source of time, but there's no single source of time. Time is a very complex, stratified thing, which comes from a combination of different levels. And what we call time is just a name we give to all these piled up structures that in our mental, in our brain, have to do with clock time, with memory, with thermodynamics, with all sorts of things. Which, and when we say, is there time at this level or not, there is some aspect, there's some other. Are you saying that when you think about the sentient being and consciousness in the sense of the experiencer of feelings is something similar? It's not a on and off. It's a Absolutely. Complicated construction.
Absolutely, you just said it. So the same way that in your recent book you have this struggle for the time that can be found for us in experience. And by the way, you mentioned memory, which is absolutely critical. It's a very important element for our kind of time. But it is something that is made of bits and pieces. It's not one thing only. And you cannot have consciousness with one ingredient. It's not going to be some magic thing, either from the quantum world or from one single process. It's going to be a very complicated process. But it's a process that has been exercised for a long time, because I would be surprised if ants and bees do not have something of this basic process. But, you know, they ought to. They have a feeling system. They have a way of representing positions of things. They have a way of representing elements, and that's why they can have such a complicated life in their nests. So I think it begins there. But will this feeling be the same kind of feeling that you or I have when we are listening to one of our favorite pieces of music or reading a favorite poem? Of course not. And there, with us, you have all these layers. I have a couple of passages in the book, because when I always like to make the difference when you're talking about these remarkable processes that we humans have, and we sort of solve them and point to these processes. I think it's awful. I always get very irritated when I see people doing this and forgetting the sophistication and complexity of humans. And where does that complexity of humans come from? In good part from memory. Because unlike creatures that have a memory of a few seconds and actually do not project much into the future, we are living any moment of our life, the kind of moment that you don't really, that you never grasp. You're living it between past memories and memories of the anticipated future. So we're completely dominated by memory, and by memory that is huge. And of course, the longer you live, and the smarter you are, and the more you've read, and the more you've thought about, the more you're a prisoner of this system of memories. And so, even if you know a little bit of the tricks of feeling or consciousness from animals, the answer is that with us, it's not quite the same thing. It's the same thing at the basics, but it's then enriched and enlarged by this spectacular stuff that comes from our human mind. But on top of it all, enriched by language, as if it were not enough to be enriched by past events. It's enriched by language as a commentary, and for those of us who are polyglot, it's enriched by many languages, giving us different nuances, sometimes on the same word or on the same verse of a poem.
Memory plays a huge role in my book, because I think something I came out from worrying about the nature of time for many years is that we tend to confuse physical time, what happens in bodies that move according to physical laws, in time, of course, with our own perception. I was going to say our own feeling of time, our own feeling of the passage of time, our own idea of time. And it seems to me that our own idea of time, what we mean usually when we say time, is mostly related to our memories. So the past, what we call the past, is really the present stored in the memories of our synapses or whatever. And that's why I talk about Proust, I talk about... and this is an old intuition that goes back to St. Augustine, Husserl. I mean, that the time of our experience is this open space created by memories and anticipations, because our brain keep
You know, in this new book, I referred at a certain point to one reason why any kind of suffering in humans has a very different significance from suffering in animals. I'm totally in favor of not doing any harm to animals if at all possible. But people that say, well, you know, you don't want to have that particular animal suffer because that's really an awful thing to do to that living creature. And it's the same thing as with a human being. This is complete baloney. It's wrong. It's not true. Because what we have, in addition to the suffering that can come of pain responses doing their job, we place the suffering always in the perspective of what has been lived and of what we want to live. Everyone in this room has an idea of where you have been today, and many of you may have things that are worrying you about what you're going to do, not just tomorrow, but in the rest of the year. And it's that ability to position yourself in the perspective of time, which comes out of memory. You wouldn't do it if you didn't have memory. That is completely different from what you can have, even in very elaborate animals. And I'm ready to concede incredible powers to marine mammals and to elephants and to chimps. But even so, there's something different about us, which has to do with this enormity of knowledge, of events that we have accumulated, together with the emotional and feeling signal that went with it. It's not just that we're storing events till the cow comes home. We're storing events, and we have the power to evoke out of a particular memory. We have the power to evoke an effective state, and we can be happy or we can be unhappy right there and then.
I have another question. Maybe time is flying, so we don't have much time left. Time is flying. Yes, there's no time. The question is what you don't know. I mean, maybe put it better. What do you think is missing in your own understanding? If there was an angel coming from the sky now and saying, Antonio, now I can explain you something that you want to know, and you really is a hard question that you would like to answer, and I can tell you, what would you ask the angel? What is your question that you would like to? What do you feel is missing or not yet understood in your field?
What do I think is missing, not what I feel is missing.
Well, whatever.
Whatever. Lots of things.
Right, but there is
they vary from the sublime to the ridiculous. Let me start with the ridiculous. I really would like to know the balance with which cortical and subcortical structures interact to create consciousness. This is a very technical aspect, but it is absolutely vital if we're going to create a full explanation for these things. I would like to know the degree to which our feelings, the feelings of happiness, the aesthetic response we have to a great poem, the degree to which this is actually only governed by the chemical molecules that are presented at the moment, or if the chemical molecules are just the start of the process. This is it appears like a technical, trivial problem, but it's not. Because when we are suddenly responding with a sense of great joy and admiration for a sublime line in a play. We were talking about Peter Brook, and I was thinking about an analysis of things like Lear or Hamlet. When we respond to that, there are different chemical signals that are being engendered by the process. There are different kinds, for example, of opioid receptor that are being engaged. We don't know if the chemical process itself is the true governor of this, or if it is just the beginning that then needs to be passed on by a variety of circuitries in order to get the full result. But it's essential to know what we really are mentally and humanly. And then I would like to know lots of things that have to do with your world of the very small things. So what is it that you want to know?
But for me it's much simpler. What is the right equation of quantum gravity?
Well. That's
Just one, the angel, please, could you write this?
Okay.
I think we can stop here. Thank you very much.